Hey guys, let's talk wacky worms. Well guys, I will be the first to admit, I am not a big wacky worm fisherman. I do it a few times, it's just not my style of fishing, but I gotta admit, as crazy as it looks, or as wacky as it looks, it works. Matter of fact, so far this year, the biggest bass I've taken, I took it with a wacky worm. So they're not just for little fish, they'll catch the big ones too. All right, so what kind of worm we're gonna use? Basically, any stick worm, pencil worm, just a plain old everyday worm. This one happens to be a Strike King. It's called a shim and stick. And basically any plain style worm like that is going to work real well on a wacky rig. For hooks, you know what? I've seen people use regular extra wide gap 3/3/0 or 4/0 hooks, just a regular worm hook, and just rig it on that, and it works. But I figured if I'm going to go to the effort of the wacky rig, I'm going to go ahead and use the wacky hook. It's a lot smaller. When you're rigging this up, I'll show you real quick. We're just going to take, we don't want to get in the middle. We want to get a little off to one side. Usually the collar is a good spot to go because it's not quite centered. And all we're going to do is push the hook on and we're going to let it dangle. So we don't need to drive a hook through the worm the way we would if we're fishing at, say, a Texas rig. And that's where this hook, the extra wide gap, it's got the real heavy hook, so you got the extra hook to bring that hook through the worm so you can set the hook, and you definitely don't need to do any of that here. So while you can, hey, if you got them, use them, it'll work. I prefer to go ahead and buy the wacky hooks themselves. That way they're a little more finesse, a little smaller, a little thinner, and that's all you need. Now, in this case, this one's got a weed guard. So I happened to find some with a weed guard on sale somewhere, and I bought like a 4-pack of these with the weed guard. But I usually don't worry too much about the weed guard, so here's what I got set up. And basically, I just cut the weed guard off. Now I'm working like a regular wacky hook. Now you can also buy these weighted. Buy a wacky hook with a weight. In my case, I just put a split shot on it. I stick a split shot on there quick. This one happens to be more of like a cylinder type. It doesn't really have the ears on it. A little tougher to get off, but it's it'll go through the grass a little better if I'm using it for other stuff. In the wacky, I guess that really doesn't make that much difference because you're feeling with an open hook anyway. This way, if one's good, if I got a smaller, if I put 2 on, I can adjust it. And again, I'm not out buying special hooks just to have a weight on them. I bought a 4-pack of wacky hooks, and now I can take a weight and put a weight on them, or I can do them weedless, and I can do it all with the same 4 hooks, and I wasn't out buying more hooks again. Now, how are we going to fish the wacky rig? Well, we're working with an open hook, so we're not going to get down in the middle of the thick stuff and the weeds and the grass if we can help it. Again, you can do the weedless, get in a little bit more in there. I like to stay right on the edge of the covers. Now, if I'm working here with lily pads, I try to put myself right out there on the edge, put that worm. Sometimes you can drop it just about that last lily pad and slip it off the side, let it go down off the side there. If I've got a rock bank or a steep bank, I'm just putting it up close to the bank just like you would any other lure, and dropping it down. But if it gets real grassy areas, I'm trying to stay out of the grass because you're going to hook it all the time with this. And so I don't like to get in it. I like to just stay out on the edge. I'll usually start with no weight if I can get by with it. There's nothing I like better than just taking the worm, the hook, and that's it. And putting that out there. It's a real lightweight system. It falls a little more naturally, but there's sometimes you just got to put a little weight with them to get them down. Now I mentioned hooking this kind of on the collar that a lot of worms have, so it's not dead center. The reason you do that with more weight on one side than the other, instead of just dropping, it's gonna flutter down. When it's sinking down, It's going to do a lot of fluttering, and that's what you're really looking for, that side-to-side action where those ends move around like that in the water. Probably 99% of the hits you'll have on a wacky worm are while it's going down. And so for me, that means when I make that first cast, when that thing hits the water, I'm keeping a real close eye on that, because the odds are that's when my first hit's going to come. Now, if I don't get it on the initial drop, I tend to like to fish a wacky rig, something like I fish a jig, and that's how I pump it. I bring it up, let it slip back down, hoping I'm going to get my strike when it goes back down again. I'll hump it up a few times, pick it up, and if I'm nothing, I'm bringing it back in and putting it out again. I want to keep it in close to cover. A lot of guys, if you're fishing just a worm and a hook and very, very little weight, a lot of guys are using spinning rigs. I don't have one. I don't fish spinning rigs. Everything I do is bait cast. And I'll tell you, I don't have any problem with that little bitty split shot. Don't worry about that little red bead. That's just my bobber stop. In case I take this rig off and I want to go with a Texas rig, I leave my bobber stop in. Figure the fish won't notice. But I'm fishing everything with a bait cast. I have no problem there. I'm using braid. I like to use braid because for me, all worm fishing's as much about sight as it is about feel. So Bob and I both use a lot of braid, and we both use high visibility braid so we can actually see it. But here you'll see I've got a leader, so I will use a fluorocarbon leader to kind of hide that a little bit from the fish. Whether they'll see anything or not, I don't know, but hey, it doesn't take me much to put a fluorocarbon leader on. I like to do it. I don't know if it makes a difference, but to me it does, and so that's why I do it. But that's how you do them, guys. Just take that wacky rig, put it on a hook, put a small weight with it, just throw it out, let it fall, and keep your eye when it's going down, because that's probably when you're going to get bit. It's a great way to catch fish, and I should probably do more of it, but I don't know, it's just not the way I started. It's kind of a newer thing over the last few years, and I guess I never fished that way up front, but some days when things get a little bit tough, it's time to put on a wacky rig, because it's going to catch you some fish when the other stuff won't. Thanks for sticking with me. Subscribe to our channel if you would. Hope to see you again real soon.